On this video, we're going to give you 5 guiding principles that RosterWatch uses when building a Dynasty Fantasy Football roster. I'm Alan Seslowsky, and thanks for tuning back into RosterWatch. The first principle to consider is the Dynasty window. Dynasty players can fall into the trap of thinking too long-term. Dynasty Fantasy Football is best thought of in 2 to 3 year windows rather than a 4 to 5 year time frame. We mostly avoid projecting players beyond the upcoming season and the one after that. With how volatile the NFL is even from week to week and season to season, it is a bad bet to project more than a handful of seasons out. There are players we feel better about long-term, of course, like Patrick Mahomes, but he is one of the precious few that represents the exception rather than the rule. The second guiding principle is understanding player liquidity. The difference between redraft and dynasty roster building is the ability to keep your roster liquid. Make sure you understand that the players that you draft have different actual value versus market value. For example, heading into 2021, DeAndre Hopkins is likely to have elite actual value. The dynasty market may label him as an aging player who some may not want to trade equal value for. If you're going to start Hopkins every week and ride out his fantasy lifespan, it doesn't matter what the market value will trade for Hopkins. You're going to benefit from his production while continuing to acquire young players and then replace him eventually in your starting lineup. On the flip side of the coin, there is obvious opportunity cost in taking this sort of an asset. There is a fine line that must be navigated when managing an overall dynasty roster. The third guiding principle when building a dynasty roster is that all production is not treated the same. Positional value matters. Young, elite wide receivers, especially in a PPR format where you need to start 3 receivers and a flex, are going to be more coveted commodity. Now, while this is true, not every year is 2014 and 2020 that yielded a huge crop of young rookie wide receivers. While we always value these young wide receivers as our true difference makers, oftentimes we'll let our competitors take on the early career risk and let the athletes gain NFL seasoning and understand the concepts. Running backs historically do not need such ramp-up time. Therefore, it makes sense to churn through young running backs while keeping a focus on acquiring the most coveted young wide receivers from a season or two prior, post-hype value. Tight end premium scoring is a growing format in popularity, which rewards the tight ends with 1.5 or 2 points PPR. This could boost the tight ends up the board and are certainly worthy of considerations in the first 2 rounds. For example, if a tight end is projected to have 60 receptions, 750 yards, and 5 touchdowns, this equates to an additional 30 fantasy points. 30 fantasy points is equivalent to an additional 5 touchdowns. Now your tight end projection can be thought of more as 60 catches, 750 yards, and 10 touchdowns when valuing the lens of a traditional format. The fourth guiding principle when building a dynasty roster is contract insulation. If we are to predict how players will be valued longer than the upcoming season, we need to understand their contract situation. Furthermore, we need to know the contract status of their quarterback. Fantasy points go as the offense goes, and often the offense goes as the quarterback goes. Many times, we see splashy headlines that a player signed a 4-year deal for some massive amount of money. It is important to research the guarantees of that contract, often which are no more than 2 NFL seasons. NFL teams have the option to get out of those contracts just after that with no penalty at all. Understand how long a player is insulated by his contract status and how long the associated pieces on the offense are as well. It is a helpful data point when building our dynasty roster for the long term. The fifth guiding principle is how the NFL calendar changes player value. Dynasty value can change significantly depending on the time of year. For example, running backs who hold top 50 overall value in March can take a massive hit after May when the real NFL draft happens and say their team drafts a young running back with significant draft capital. It is important to understand the NFL calendar and how it can change your dynasty value. Okay, RosterWatch Nation, that's it for today. Remember to like and subscribe to get notifications when we go live, and leave us a comment in the video. We will comment back. Until next time, goodbye.